There's a FNAF fan game on pretty much everything these days. For any established franchise or popular media that you can think of, there's always someone that's made a FNAF fan game about it. However, back in the early days of FNAF fan games, only the most popular franchises had games based on them, like the Mario series and the subject of today's video, Spongebob, the most popular cartoon in existence. Back in 2015, Five Nights at the Krusty Krab would explode onto the YouTube scene, with Let's Players all over trying it out. But as FNAF faded from the Let's Play spotlight and slowly evolved over time, Five Nights at the Krusty Krab was left in the dust. Eventually, certain FNAF fan games began to lean more towards gameplay instead of horror, creating very difficult challenges. And eventually, the Spongebob name would be picked up again to create the subject of today's video, Mr. Krabs Night of Terror, a FNAF fan game focused purely on overwhelming the player in its hardest max mode, worst day ever. This is a game that I've had my eye on for a while, mainly because it can be farmed to shit for points, but don't worry about that for right now, we'll talk about that later. And it's about time that I made a video on it. So let's go over my quest to perfect the hardest SpongeBob FNAF fan game, Mr. Krabs Night of Terror.
I lost something I couldn't live without. My identity.
Yeah, this is really what we're doing instead of Frick Bears 3. I promise, guys, one day I will make a video on it. I'm just busy right now with this and more. On the surface, Mr. Krabs Night of Terror takes a lot of inspiration from Ultimate Custom Night. We have two doors on our left and right side, a vent located in the top middle of the room, and two buttons at the bottom of the screen for the cameras and mask respectively. However, unlike UCN, Mr. Krabs Night of Terror is completely devoid of keyboard. Everything in this game is controlled purely with the mouse. Each door has a button to close it and turn on the light within the door, allowing you to see if someone's there. When opening up the cameras, you can mouse around the building. Pretty standard stuff here. Where things really get interesting with Mr. Krabs Night of Terror, or MK Not, as I'll be referring to it throughout the rest of this video, are the characters. There is a total of 15 characters in MK Not, which is a pretty populated roster for a game that isn't directly based on Ultimate Custom Night. Each character has their own unique quirks that will become important as we get into the harder challenges in this video. But for now, we can categorize everyone into groups, as it's easier to explain and remember who does what that way. Looking at the roster, I identified three main groups: door characters, camera characters, and office characters. Door characters are the easiest to understand, and definitely the least mechanically unique out of all of the characters in MK Not. SpongeBob, Patrick, Kelly, Doodlebob, and Miss Puff make up this category. Patrick and Doodlebob are the simplest. If you see them appear in the door when turning on the light, make sure to close the door for a bit and they'll go away. Miss Puff will also appear in the lights, but the doors will not affect her. Instead, you need to flicker the light in order for her to go away. This can be done by just spamming the button, or holding the left mouse button down, then mousing over the light button repeatedly. SpongeBob and Kelly require a bit more attention. SpongeBob will make a whistling sound cue, a direct reference to Five Nights at Chuck E. Cheese Rebooted, another fan game that I have been stalling for forever now. One day we'll play it. Anyway, after that sound cue plays, he'll wait for a bit, then appear at the door shortly afterwards. You can't see him with the lights, so just remember to close the right door for him, then after a while, open it. He camps for a long time, so make sure to leave it closed for a while. Power is generally not an issue in this game, so don't worry about that. Lastly, Kelly can go to either door, but has no sound or visual cues like the rest of the characters. Instead, track her on the cameras in order to know when to close the doors on her. Moving into the camera system, we have our next batch of characters. Plankton will play voice lines throughout the night. Once you hear one, head into the cameras and search for him. Once you find him, he'll instantly go away. No need to watch him. However, you will need to watch Michelin Man, who slowly progresses throughout the building towards your office. If you see him on the cameras, linger on his camera for a bit to send him away. In case you haven't noticed already, even though this game is based around SpongeBob, there's a lot of just random shit thrown in here. A lot of it is just Redditor humor from like 2019, so if you're ever getting angry repeatedly failing at this game, it just throws a bit of salt in the wound, you know? I do like how most of these are like the oh my god, it's so goober cute. And then there's just Costume wearing a shirt saying he loves Steven. Hey man, that's a little bit edgy. And as you know, the FNAF Max Mode community is one of the best and least toxic places to be on the entire internet.
This is a video for my fucking haters. You're a fucking
Actually, hold on. When was this game made? 2024. Damn, dude. Some people really are just like stuck in that surreal Reddit era. Who made this? Matt Warkowski. Actually, you know what? No, that makes sense. Damn, dude. This is dank AF. You know what? I shouldn't be this critical of people having fun. What was I even laughing at back then?
Look me smoking the blunt. God, I'm so high.
Huh? Yeah, this isn't much better. If I wanted to see Yuri, I just what the fuck even is that? Oh no. Yeah, okay. I'm in too deep. Get out. Get out. Back to the video. Get out. Happy acts as a speed check when moving throughout the cameras. He'll randomly appear at a low opacity within the camera, and if you linger for too long, he'll progress forward. He has 11 total stages before he outright jump scares you, so you have a lot of room for error throughout the night. But just know that for later in this video, it's good to get used to moving through the cameras quickly and avoiding all Happy progress. Happy won't spawn on Michelin Man's camera, so really you'll only get caught by him if you have a minor aiming error when trying to find plankton. Squidward acts as your traditional Foxy type character. He'll sit in his house in camera 3 and slowly progress out until he leaves the camera. Once he leaves, he'll charge your left door, making a sound when he hits the door. The last character in the cameras is a bit hard to classify for me as to whether or not he's a camera character or a door character, but I ultimately decided to place him in the camera category. Like Kelly, Yamcha will appear on either the right or left cameras near your office, and you must remember his position and move the Cybermen in the office to whatever side he's on to prevent him from entering the office and ending your run. The office characters are some of the most polarizing in the entire game. This category has both the easiest characters in the game and, in my opinion, the hardest. Mr. Krabs will appear in the top vent. When he does, throw the mask on and he'll leave after about a second. Fred will randomly appear in the office and require you to break his leg in order to make him leave. Honest to God, I don't think I've seen a single person ever die to this character. Gary will make his way through the vent slowly, and once fully progressed, he'll enter the office for a FNAF 2 style blackout. Simply putting the mask on within a few seconds will make him leave.
Thought I was new to Mr. Krabs Night of Terror.
The last two characters are, in my opinion, some of the hardest to deal with in the game, Baby Patrick and Ghost Squidward. Whenever you pull up the cameras, Baby Patrick will spawn at the top of the screen in a random location, and you have to click him to get rid of him. That's all. Though, if you pull up the cameras again and Baby Patrick is still in your office, your run will end the next time you drop the cameras.
I went to college.
Idiot, bro. This might not seem too hard, but trust me, with all the crazy shit going on in this game, it is really easy to forget Baby Patrick, especially when Ghost Squidward shows up. Ghost Squidward forces you to pull up the cameras to get rid of him, and he doesn't give you all that much time to do so. So if you're already waiting on a door character or have the mask on for someone, it can get really stressful trying to pull up the cameras in time to get rid of him. That covers all of the characters in this game. Now, let's see how they all work together for our first ranked max mode, True Showdown. But before we get to True Showdown, I first want to thank you guys for the insane support on the startup of this second channel. We've already reached 60,000 subs with only one real video. And hey, if you're new around here, please consider subscribing and hyping this video. These help me out more than anything else. But of course, only do so if you're enjoying the video so far. Now on to True Showdown. True Showdown is the first step in progressing towards this game's real max mode, worst day ever. With every character set to 20 AI, we now have to deal with everyone all at once. But before we jump in, I'd argue that we can start off with even more. Throughout this video, there's going to be a lot of jumping, which is basically just ignoring build-up in favor of brute forcing the harder challenge. And instead of beating True Showdown, I'd say the best way to start playing MK Not is actually True Showdown with the Ultimatum Challenge enabled. The Ultimatum Challenge introduces a minor buff to most of the cast, and it's important to get used to these for Worst Day Ever. If you couldn't tell from the character explanations, there is a lot to keep track of in MK Not, and we'll be using timers to assist us for a lot of these characters. For characters like Kelly, you can fully script them out using intervals, and since the True Showdown intervals are different from the True Showdown Ultimatum intervals, you might as well just start here. Now, what's the best strategy to deal with all of these characters? Well, in short, what we're trying to do is reduce as much of the information gathering process as possible by predicting and syncing characters. The first few characters that we can simplify are Kelly and Yamcha. Both of these characters are supposed to require you to track them on the cameras, then deal with them depending on where they are in the building. However, players found that when Kelly approaches your doors, she always arrives at the exact same times every night, roughly every 24 seconds. So instead of wasting time tracking her in the cameras, just close both doors on every Kelly interval and she'll have no way of getting in. Do be careful though, as Kelly can attack at any point within the entire second of the Kelly interval. So if the interval is at 24 seconds, make sure both doors are closed from 24.0 to 25.0. While dealing with Kelly, move the Cybermen for Yamcha. As long as you always synchronize the Cybermen movement with a Kelly interval, Yamcha will never reach your office. With Yamcha and Kelly's mechanics countered through our timer, this means that we only have to go into the cameras for two characters, Plankton and Michelin Man. Whenever you hear one of Plankton's sound cues, head into the cameras and begin searching for Plankton. Once you've got him, find Michelin Man on either camera 8 or 9, then watch him for a second to send him back. Once Michelin leaves, be sure to select camera 3 before dropping the cameras. I stated before that Squidward is very similar to Foxy from the base FNAF games. And like many of the characters in the vanilla FNAF games, Squidward is victim to cam stalling, where selecting a character's camera prevents them from moving until you click off of it. And cam stalling Squidward drops his attack frequency from around every 50 seconds to about every 90 seconds. So you always want to end your camera cycle here while taking a glance at Squidward's progress. If he's about to leave, make sure to shut the left door. Now we've fully synchronized and created some pairings of characters, and there's one more we can create in the office. You aren't able to click the door buttons through the mask, but you can break Fred's legs while the mask is on, making it a pretty good idea to always sync Fred with Mr. Krabs and Baby Patrick if available. These pairings of characters drastically reduce the amount of brain power we need to use throughout the night, but there are still some things we need to watch out for, particularly with the door characters. Door characters in MK Not are very punishing, and if you aren't constantly checking the lights, it's very easy to get caught off guard by one. So whenever you're in the office, constantly check the lights for Patrick, Doodlebob, and Miss Puff. For Spongebob though, we're going to have to get a bit more technical. Most FNAF players use a specific timer for in-game tracking, simply called the FNAF timer. This timer allows you to display intervals and also use multiple timers at once. When you hear SpongeBob's whistling cue, start a second timer using the spacebar. 6 seconds after SpongeBob's sound cue, he's going to begin camping your right door for an additional 6 seconds. If you open the door during any of these 6 seconds, he'll jump scare you. So in order to get as close as possible to this dead zone, close the door when your second timer is around 4 seconds to account for the sound cue reaction time, then open it at 12 seconds. This ensures that you'll spend as little time as possible with the right door closed. Right now, this isn't super important, and you can afford to have the doors closed for quite a while. But for the future, knowing exactly when characters like SpongeBob will leave and proper door management will be absolutely critical. As long as you have good awareness of your timer and can keep track of all the different characters throughout the night, True Showdown Ultimatum should go down no problem. And with that, we've completed the learning process for this game's True Max Mode Worst Day Ever. We've covered some pretty crazy jumps within games before. 50/20 Deluxe No Death Coin is around 200 spots lower than Hopeless Pursuit. The Pixel Pointer modes in FNAF 3 But Better are nearly 300 spots away from their normal counterparts. But the gap between Worst Day Ever and True Showdown Ultimatum really takes the cake, with an 800 spot difference. We've already seen how much you need to keep track of in true Showdown Ultimatum, so what could possibly have been buffed to raise Worst Day Ever this much? Well, let's find out. By enabling the 2 other challenges on the custom night menu, we enter the Worst Day Ever. However, just these 2 challenges alone aren't enough to carry Worst Day Ever that much higher than true Showdown Ultimatum. Along with Pathogen and Long Nights, Worst Day Ever also has 7 buffs that are gradually added throughout the night. And to make things a bit more interesting, let's put them on a tier list based on difficulty as we explain what they do. From the start of the night, you'll now notice that we have a Pathogen meter, which I'm guessing takes inspiration from the scrapped FNAF 2 mechanic of the same name. The Pathogen meter will gradually fill up when you're either in the cameras or have the mask on, and if it ever reaches full capacity, your character will go Golden Freddy mode and be unable to do anything. On its own, Pathogen just forces you to be a lot faster in finding Plankton and Michelin Man, but combined with some later buffs and character combos, Pathogen can be very punishing. For example, if you happen to be in the cameras looking for Plankton and Michelin Man, then Gary spawns in the office, you'll have to be even faster than usual to account for the extra Pathogen that you'll use up when putting the mask on for him. All in all, a pretty middle of the road buff. C tier. Long Nights is the most standard out of all of these challenges, simply just increasing the night length from 5 minutes and 50 seconds to 10 minutes. It's hard to argue that this challenge isn't one of the most difficult, as it practically doubles the night length. So yeah, A tier, no questions asked. Now we can get into our first gradual buffs, Monochromatic Malice and Global Warming. Monochromatic Malice is purely a visual change. Over time, the building will start to change colors along with a wavy effect meant to throw you off. Combined with a lot of the other buffs, this makes up what's arguably the most difficult part of Worst Day Ever, the visuals. The best way that I can describe the atmosphere of Worst Day Ever is that it tricks you into thinking that way more is happening than what really is. Like here, let me take this section from the end of the night. And if you remove the blaring music, the 3 billion costumes in the office, and the monochromatic malice effects, it's pretty much just true Showdown Ultimatum with slightly faster characters and some new additions. It just goes to show how much distractions and visuals can actually make a difference when compared to traditional difficulty buffs like smaller hitboxes or faster characters. This buff specifically is the least threatening out of the visual changes though, so I'm gonna put it in B tier. Global Warming is without question an S tier buff. Remember back in the True Showdown Ultimatum section when I said that knowing when door characters are going to leave the doors is very critical for this mode? Well, this is why. Global Warming causes the doors to heat up the longer that they're closed. Specifically, the doors will completely break if they happen to be closed for 12 seconds. They do recharge pretty fast when opened, but it can be very difficult to judge exactly when to open them. This isn't really a problem for the left door, as all of the characters there leave fairly quickly, but the right door with the big bob can be really tricky. If you get a combo where you have to deal with Spongebob, Doodlebob, and Kelly all in sequence, it's really easy to open the door at the wrong time, or stall for too long and break the door, especially with everything else going on in the office. Costumes Comeback is probably the most threatening buff when first starting out in Worst Day Ever, essentially just adding a brand new character. Costume from Chuck E. Cheese Rebooted. He works the same way that he does in that game here. You have to watch him in camera too to keep him from moving. The game will display a timer that shows how close he is to moving, and if he gets the whole way to your office, you lose. The costume in the cameras is by far the most critical part of this buff. But Costumes Comeback also adds a bunch of visual costumes around the office, a door costume that functions as a reaction check, and other costumes that replace various characters as you get later into the night. A tier buff, but not quite as game-changing as Global Warming in my opinion. Adpocalypse is another visual buff, adding distractions that fly across the screen. In my opinion, this is by far the easiest out of all of the buffs. Even though the ads do take up a bit of space, you're able to get rid of them after they've been on screen for a bit. And there are a lot of moments where you're watching costume or sitting with the mask on where you can easily clear them. What they will make you do is rage when you die to some bullshit and the last thing you see is this image. Oh. Oh, oh my god! Oh, that's like top 3. That's top 3 or 2. Oh my god! Oh my god! No, dude, this might beat the rabbit. This might beat the bunny. Hyper mode is the simplest buff to explain. It just makes everyone faster. It isn't by too much. For example, Kelly is only about 2 seconds faster than her normal intervals, but some characters like Mr. Krabs and Patrick can become very annoying when you're getting jumped by everyone else. Very middle of the road buff, B tier. Plankton's plan gives Plankton a second mechanic beyond searching for him in the cameras. Office Planktons will randomly spawn and fly across the screen. Make sure you click them before they go off screen, otherwise they'll take 1% of your power. This doesn't add too much, but the Office Planktons can be annoying with how they spawn, sometimes getting stuck in corners. And with everything else going on in the office, they can be a bit hard to spot. Thankfully, you can miss a few and be alright no problem. But man, this buff sure would be a pain if you couldn't miss any. As it stands now though, C tier. I am happy turns happy from a mild threat to a very powerful one. Before, Happy would only sometimes appear in cameras that weren't occupied by Michelin Man or Costume. But now, Happy will be present in every single other camera. Happy only gives you 0.5 seconds to click off of his camera before progressing. He has 11 total stages that he progresses through before he jump scares you, so there's a lot of leniency here. But even still, misclicking once at any point means that Happy is sure to progress. Easy B tier here. Once I had learned all of the buffs, it was finally time to begin Worst Day Ever, and as I was playing it and playing it and playing it, I felt something that I hadn't really felt in quite some time playing a max mode. This game is fun, like really fun. I know I was kind of dogging on this game earlier for the humor in it, but from a pure gameplay perspective, this is the most that I've enjoyed a max mode in a long time. Now, you could say that's because Worst Day Ever is a lot lower on the list than the modes that I normally play, and top modes are almost never fun, but even still, the balance of brain power that you need to keep track of characters along with how fast and smooth the game feels, it is truly a blast to play. And that's why it really sucks that we have to ruin it completely. As much as I would love to just beat Worst Day Ever, make this video and call it a day, today we're in store for a much worse challenge. You see, Worst Day Ever is unique in that it has the most densely packed collection of pre-patches, self-imposed challenges, and mods that you can apply to one mode. Hang on, because this is about to get a little bit complicated. You see, on the all modes list, self-imposed challenges are ranked alongside traditional max modes, giving players a way to deliberately make a max mode harder by fulfilling an optional requirement. The most iconic of these is Hopeless Greed, requiring the player to complete the max mode Hopeless Pursuit, but also reach the coin cap of 70 by the end of the night. These self-imposed challenges can make a night much harder, and Worst Day Ever is no exception to this. Remember that we have two characters who both progress through stages before jump scaring you, Costume and Happy. This means that in theory, if you beat Worst Day Ever and keep Costume in camera too, you've completed the self-imposed challenge Worst Day Ever, no costume progress. And if you beat Worst Day Ever without ever letting Happy progress, you've completed the challenge Worst Day Ever, no Happy progress. Or, as the community has dubbed it, Saddest Day Ever. So that gives us two self-imposed challenges that branch off of Worst Day Ever, and if we were to combine them into one mode, with the added condition that Plankton can never take power throughout the entire night, that gets us Perfect Worst Day Ever. This means that if we can beat Perfect Worst Day Ever, we'd get the rewards of 4 modes despite only beating 1. But don't worry, it gets a whole lot crazier. You see, when a max mode has progressive buffs or difficulty changes throughout the night, it's pretty common for players to eventually mod a version where these changes are constant throughout the night. For example, Puppet Master All Challenges sees Vinny getting harder as the night progresses, so players have made mods to keep him at his 5 AM difficulty all night. These are known as Eternal mods. Developer Arsic Barsic would develop a mod that allows us to apply all of the Worst Day Ever buffs right at the start of the night, which gives us Eternal Worst Day Ever. But hold on! Now that we've created Eternal Worst Day Ever, this means that all of the self-imposed challenges that we just did also have their own Eternal counterparts, bringing our total to 8 modes that we can combine by beating just one of them. But hold on!
Hold up! Hold up!
We also have a pre-patch. Currently, Mr. Krabs Night of Terror is on version 2.2.3, but version 2.1.1 has a bunch of changes that make the night harder, and Arsic Barsic would add this pre-patch version into the Eternal mod, meaning that we now have 16 modes that we can conquer all at once if we can just beat one. Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch. Currently the hardest challenge in Mr. Krabs Night of Terror, and as someone who's constantly juggling a leaderboard spot on the AML with videos and being an adult, my bounty hunter senses were tingling, and I knew what I had to do. I shared my thoughts with Montanero, one of the best MK0 players in the community, and he said that it would be really funny if I did Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch as my first win for any of these modes, making for one of the craziest jumps ever when progressing through a FNAF fan game. So I set off to do just that. In the little experience that I had with Worst Day Ever, I was progressing rapidly on it. Just how much worse can Perfect Eternal pre-patch be? Well, to figure that out, we have to explain all the additional changes that Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch has from base Worst Day Ever. I've never done quite a jump like this in a video before. Usually I follow some sort of ladder process. So I'll go step by step in explaining what each component of Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch changes or requires, starting with version 2.1.1. The version 2.1.1 patch of Mr. Krabs Night of Terror has many changes that make the night harder, but not quite in the way that you would expect. Typically, pre-patches are ranked on the list because at their time of release, they were just too hard for anyone to complete. So they had to be nerfed and verified in a later patch, and then a good enough player would eventually come back to finish the mode on the pre-patch version. This isn't the case on MK0 though. The reason that the pre-patch is so hard on MK0 is because the game is just straight up worse. The lights now require clicks to turn on and off instead of holds, similar to FNAF 1's lights, which pretty much cuts our CPS in half, making Miss Puff take forever to deal with. Though the lights aren't even that bad when compared with the absolutely horrible scrolling in the office. In pre-patch, looking side to side in the office is way looser, and it feels like going past a certain point in the screen causes the office to completely scroll to one edge. Whereas in the current version of the game, the scrolling tightly follows your cursor, making it much harder to aim in the office on the pre-patch version. But even that is nothing compared to the worst pre-patch change, the camera hitboxes.
Yeah, let me get it. Sorry, we don't got it. Only for the fresh cut, nigga.
I can't find shit I'm looking for, though.
Hey, my man, look, all I got is a $20 bill. I just started this job. Don't rob me.
Nigga, I'm not about to rob you.
Shit, I can't tell with your shit looking that nappy like that, boy.
Who is you? Boy, remember you was talking to me earlier?
Self-destruct sequence activate.
Comparing the pre-patch cams to the current cams, the pre-patch cams are nearly 40% smaller. Now, some people like to say that these camera hitboxes don't make a difference when compared to the current patch, and I have a rebuttal. Bullshit! People like to talk about flicking to the door button in Froggers as if it's the hardest aim in all of FNAF. Yeah? Look at the size of a pre-patch camera hitbox compared to a Frogger's door button. Remember, this is the door hitbox. Oh, well, you might be saying, Bones, that doesn't matter, you can misclick all the time in MK0, but one error in Froggers and you're dead. Well, think again, because remember, Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch includes the self-imposed challenge No Happy Progress. No Happy Progress on pre-patch is straight up dirty. It is disgusting. Remember, Happy will progress one stage every 0.5 seconds that you're on his camera. And because we're on Eternal mode, the I am happy buff is on from the start of the night, meaning he's in every camera. And with a kill timer that small, you can't miss a camera on a cam search. Ever. If you misclick even once, Happy will progress and your run will be over. Here's what I would say the typical character difficulty tier list would look like in normal Worst Day Ever. And this is Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch. Honestly, it makes sense. By design, Happy is meant to progress a lot. Considering that he has 11 stages and you do about 2 camera searches per minute, you would only need to have a good camera search around half the time to complete the night normally. It's no wonder that despite most combinations of self-imposed challenges and versions being verified for Worst Day Ever, any combination of No Happy Progress and pre-patch hasn't yet been completed. And that's what we have to do today. No Costume Progress also creates some difficult scenarios, but doesn't require brutal speed and precision like Happy does. You just need to be hyper aware of who could be be at the doors anytime that you want to watch Costume, which with enough time becomes fairly easy to manage. Generally, I found the best points to watch Costume were either when the left door was closed for Patrick, or all 3 traditional door characters have been taken care of. Patrick moves much faster than Doodlebob, so if the door is closed for him, it's safe to watch Costume for a bit. Doodlebob will usually come to the doors close to when Patrick arrives, but his kill timer is much longer, so no need to worry when watching Costume. If you can keep Costume in camera 2 the whole night, and never let Happy progress during a cam search, you will have completed Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch. So how was that going for me? When I was starting out, I expected Happy to be the hardest thing for me to get used to, but initially he wasn't the hardest character for me. Since I was jumping from pretty much nothing, getting used to everyone at the doors and how all of the buffs worked was proving more difficult. It was just a lot to keep track of at first, but as I was watching some other Worst Day Ever completions, I realized that I might be able to eliminate some of the tracking with additional timer strats. Currently, we're using intervals to track Kelly, but we can also use intervals to track Squidward. Kind of. Earlier, I mentioned that Squidward gets camera stalled if you're selected on camera 3 when the cameras are down, but if he's never stalled throughout the night, Squidward will always attack at the same points in the night, roughly every 50 seconds. This works out great for us, as Costume's timer will count down slower if you have his camera selected when the cameras are down, and since Costume is an ever-present threat, I'd much rather slow him down than Squidward. There is one problem with this though. If Squidward happens to be in his last stage and you select his camera, Squidward will be offset from his usual intervals. We avoid Squidward's camera as much as we can, but if he happens to be in his last stage and Plankton spawns on camera 3, we don't have much of a choice. Even when Squidward does get offset though, it isn't that hard to mentally track that he'll be a few seconds behind, since he's one of the few characters that makes an audio cue when he hits the door. This made the mental tracking a bit easier. Now it was time to optimize the camera cycle. We want the camera cycles to be as fast as possible, but also to include as little clicks as possible so that we have the least risk of making Happy progress. When I was starting out, I figured the best way to do cam cycles would be to hit every possible Plankton camera in sequence, then remember Michelin's position and get him afterwards. This does look super cool and feel amazing to pull off, but it isn't quite optimal. Remember that Plankton can go to any of these 7 cameras, so he has a higher likelihood of being in this group of 4 than not. Michelin will always be in one of these 2 cameras, so long as you've properly synced him with Plankton. So instead of hitting every single Plankton camera, I decided to go with Manzanero's camera cycle strategy. In this strat, you search the right bottom cameras, then the left bottom cameras. After searching these cams, you'll know where Michelin is. It's just a matter of reacting and not missing to then select his camera and watch him. If Plankton was on one of the bottom cameras, you can then just select Costume's camera here and end the cycle early. If he wasn't on the bottom cams, see if he's on 7 and 2, then check 3. This ensures that we only select camera 3 when we absolutely have to, so we avoid offsetting Squidward whenever possible. With this new cycle, I was able to get a personal best of 256 within an hour or 2 of playtime, which for how difficult this mode is supposed to be, was a lot faster than I expected, though only time would tell if that would continue. As I played more and more, that 256 was beginning to seem like a bit of a fluke. You see, even though Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch is a reactionary mode, having no explicit cycle, things will generally happen around the same time in the night, with some mild variance between attempts. And as the nights go on, they deviate more and more from one another. This creates points in the night where characters can attack all at once and combo you, and the first choke point that I identified was at about 2:30. At 2:31, we have a Kelly interval to deal with, but along with that Kelly interval, we also have a Squidward interval. I had no issue tracking Squidward alongside Kelly, so long as they were separate, but when both come one after another, I often found myself opening the doors after the Kelly interval and forgetting that Squidward is on the way. This was made much worse by Squidward's offsets that I mentioned earlier. Around 45 seconds into the night, you'll do a cam search for Plankton after the 43-second Kelly interval, and during this cam search, Squidward will always be in his last stage of progression. So if Plankton happens to spawn on camera 3, Squidward will be desynced for the rest of the night. I don't find it very difficult to track Squidward's desyncs when I'm only thinking about him, but throw Spongebob and Kelly into the mix, most of the time I would forget him. If I wasn't dying to this choke point, I was instead dealing with how brutally strict Happy is on pre-patch. Every single cam cycle felt like rolling the dice as to whether or not my arm would tense up too much and I'd miss one of the smaller movements in the bottom cameras. Eventually, I'd PB a bit with a 308, and I felt pretty good about this run. My happy movement was getting quicker. I was able to keep track of Squidward at the 230 choke point. I knew that something big was coming soon. As it stood right now, there were some other players that were playing Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch. Freddy Co and Manzanero, both players that had way more experience in the game than me and currently had personal bests that were further than mine. The three of us were pushing the limits of Mr. Krabs Night of Terror together, and I felt that it was finally my turn to throw my hat into the race. Not only would I push past 3 minutes for the second time, I'd fluke an entire minute to get a new personal best of 428. This time, dying to who I think is one of the most underrated characters in this game, Mr. Krabs. Krabs is usually the last priority in the office, as we sync him with Fred and often deal with him while waiting on a door character to leave. However, Krabs can actually be pretty strict if he happens to show up at a bad time. If Krabs appears right before a camera cycle, you'll have to choose to either delay Plankton and Michelin Man in favor of dealing with Krabs and Fred first, or rush the camera cycle and delay dealing with Fred and Krabs. In this case, I decided to rush the cameras, which normally is the right call, but with the nerves of being on a new personal best, I made the mistake of checking for door characters before putting the mask on, and due to the extremely slow lights in pre-patch, spent way too much time dealing with Miss Puff. And right before my mouse was about to hit the mask, Krabs ended my run. Even still, this was a massive step forward. I was only about a minute behind Freddy Co and Manzanero now. Even though Happy and the pre-patch changes made this version a lot clunkier to play than the current patch, I was still having a good time. It had been a while since I'd played a max mode or done a challenge that was just genuinely fun, and so much internal comparisons between myself and other top players had led me to performing far worse than what I believed I was truly capable of. We'll expand more on that story in a future main channel video, but for now, this felt like the first time that I'd ever played a max mode at my fullest potential, and I was progressing rapidly. According to Manzanero, Perfect Eternal pre-patch is harder than Rainbow Geddon, which is nearly the same difficulty as Hopeless Pursuit. It's crazy to think that Hopeless Pursuit had completely broken me and took over a month to complete. And yet here I was, nearly halfway through a mode that's almost as difficult in just a couple hours. Let's not get too carried away though. For one, there were some other factors making Hopeless Pursuit more difficult, and also, this 426 could just be a fluke. These nights are long, and we still haven't even reached the halfway point yet. I had my sights set on 5 minutes. If I could get halfway soon, I might even be able to be the first in the world to complete the mode. After this 426, momentum slowed a bit, and I was beginning to die more and more to this one stupid character. It felt like the more that I adapted to the brain side of the game by keeping track of characters and squeezing out as much costume watch time as I could, Happy would check my mechanical skill and I died to overtension or a misclick. Even when I was perfect in my aiming though, RNG can play a role in making Happy much more difficult. MK Not takes a lot of inspiration from Chuck E. Cheese Rebooted, as you can probably tell. One of the most annoying quirks that game has is within the cameras, where, based on a random chance, the cameras will cut out due to signal loss, preventing you from dealing with camera characters. The signal loss in MK Not is significantly toned down from Chuck E. Cheese Rebooted. In fact, unless you were playing a variation of Saddest Day Ever, I doubt you'd even remember that it's in the game. But if you get unlucky enough, it can completely ruin a camera cycle. Remember, during the first part of the camera cycle, we always check these 4 cameras to try and get Plankton while also locating Michelin Man. It makes for a very simple click pattern. If I see Michelin as I'm on the right side, I can just add an extra click and get him once I clear the left side. If I don't see Michelin on the right side, I know he must be on the left side and I wait after clicking the bottom left camera to watch him. However, if the cameras happen to cut out right when I'm gathering info about Michelin's position and I don't see if he's in the bottom right camera or not, he becomes a near impossible reaction check. Most times, my brain wouldn't even process that I didn't see him in that camera, and I would just go to the bottom left camera thinking he was there, and if he wasn't, Happy was waiting for an easy kill. This can get really crazy if you end up getting signal loss when you're looking at both of Michelin's possible cameras, so you pretty much have no idea where he's at, and a Happy death is inevitable. I think I've only survived this one time, and if I can find the clip, I'll play it now. Yeah, really unfortunate timing sometimes. This combined with general aiming mistakes led to me dying a lot more to Happy around this time than any other character, and I was starting to get a bit discouraged. Aim is my strong suit, it always has been, so I figured that I was doing something wrong to not properly adapt my skill into this game. After doing a live stream with very little success, I took a step back and tried to figure out why I was having so many issues with Happy, and I think it came down to what we touched on in the very beginning of this video. The main difficulty of Worst Day Ever isn't the mechanics, it's the visuals that are convincing you that way more is happening than what actually is. I talked to Ultimate about this, another player who has a lot of MK0 experience, and he gave me some extremely valuable advice. Only go as fast as you need to when searching for Happy. Focus more on not missing than speeding through the cameras. Because I'm always turning these challenges into videos, I like to move as fast as I can in situations where you need to click a bunch of targets at once. It just makes for better clips and montages and background gameplay. But when slowing down, I was finally able to realize my biggest problem with Happy. When I'd open the cameras, I'd aim based off my peripheral vision and muscle memory, then focus on what's in the cameras with my main focal vision, just to make sure that I didn't miss Michelin Man's location. Looking at it now though, this seems kind of counterintuitive. Michelin Man is a big guy, and I think it would be a lot smarter to focus on the small camera hitboxes with my focal vision and use my peripheral vision for Michelin Man. By changing my focus and only moving as fast as I needed to, I felt like I was getting much more consistent with Happy, and I could feel that a new PB was on the horizon. After slowly trudging my way through the 4th minute, I began to notice that there were now 2 choke points in the night. 2:30 like we discussed before, and 4:05. By the 4th minute of the night, it's pretty common for Mr. Krabs and Fred to begin offsetting from when they normally appear, and you have to be quick in your decision making when they appear right before a camera cycle. Krabs takes 8 seconds to kill once reaching the vent, and if you're trying to manage a bunch of door characters alongside a Plankton and Michelin cycle, it is super easy to forget him. And that was beginning to happen to me a bunch around 4 minutes. Either I just barely wouldn't make it to the mask for Krabs, or I'd end up neglecting door characters and the camera cycle. Beyond this point in the night, we reach what I'd like to call no man's land. From 4 minutes onward, characters begin to desync to the point where your prior experience will be less and less accurate in predicting when someone is going to show up. You're going to have to rely on your situational awareness and brain power to keep track of everyone as they appear. I worked to train this more in the earlier minutes for the next session or two, hyper-focusing on my tracking of each character and noticing patterns for when certain characters would show up in relation to others. I'd already gotten good enough with Happy to make some big progress. I just needed to further grasp the flow of the night, and another PB would soon be in range. On July 7th, I got ready for a session of Mr. Krabs Night of Terror. At this point, I'd sunk around 8 hours into the mode, and my understanding of each character was getting better and better. I felt like it was finally time to take a chunk out of no man's land. I was beginning to feel the flow of this game, and I was loving it. I felt like the game was rewarding my speed and precision with aiming, and I wasn't having any trouble keeping up on the brain side of things. I had a choke at 6 minutes, but I could feel that I hadn't quite reached my limit for this session. I started up one more run, and did better than I ever had before. This is the fastest that I've ever progressed on a mode of this difficulty. Who knew that when you're actually enjoying the game you're playing, the game becomes significantly easier? I wasn't just in No Man's Land, I was skipping through it minutes at a time. This was the first time since Max Mode No Buffs that I was actively enjoying progressing in a mode. I felt no mental struggle to keep going. There were no mind blocks, I would just get on every day, play for a bit, and at this point, I was getting a personal best nearly every session. But maybe this was just a fluke. Maybe this was where my streak of blitzing through the mode ends. Because now we've reached the finale. The last segment of the Worst Day Ever song features Finale from Undertale. But along with the loud music, the screen begins to shake and the visuals distort even more. I was warned that even though I was progressing extremely fast up to Finale, Finale was where this streak was going to end. My 826 was just barely outside of when Finale heats up and the screen starts shaking. And I had been told that trying to consistently aim for no happy progress on pre-patch cams during this part of the night was going to have me stuck for a while. Well, we got a chance to find out a few days later, when on July 10th, I got on this run.
I want to go.
It turns out that yes, I could handle the aim even with the Finale visuals. But when faced with a similar scenario to that 405 choke point we talked about earlier at the very end of the night, I made a small error in prioritizing Miss Puff before Krabs, and ended up dying at 9:49. Now for a death that was 98% of the way through the night, I had an awfully calm reaction. And that's because this run wasn't perfect. At around 7 minutes, I happened to encounter the bug that we talked about earlier where plankton gets stuck near the edges of the screen. If I were to have won, this still would have counted as a verification for Eternal Saddest Day Ever pre-patch no costume progress, and counted for most of the Worst Day Ever based modes. But it wasn't quite enough. If anything though, this proved that I had the skill to beat this soon, and a day later, I was having some crazy consistency. First, I had this run, which died to an incorrect prediction of when Squidward would hit the door.
Squidward! Oh my god, hit the door! Fuck, bro! How offset are you?
I kid you not, 5 minutes later, I started up a different run and this happened.
I want to dodge.
Another brutal reminder of how fast Patrick is on hyper mode. If you're going in the cameras for a Plankton and Michelin cycle, you better make damn sure the last thing you check is that left door. At this point, I was now averaging at least one attempt past 8 minutes per session, sometimes 2. My consistency was peaking. I just needed to cross that last 10-second barrier to close it out.
Oh.
And there it was, Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch completed. if Plankton's plot was coded properly. Yep. One of the runs where I had the skill to win ended up not satisfying the requirements for perfect. Wouldn't you know it, in the later half of the night, Plankton got stuck on a wall and took power. But for the sake of practice, I finished the run and verified Eternal Saddest Day Ever pre-patch no costume progress. At this point, I was really debating on whether or not I wanted to finish this out. If you compare what I just did and Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch purely on skill, they're the exact same difficulty. You just have to pray that you don't hit a bug with Plankton so you can satisfy that stupid requirement for perfect. I knew I had what it takes, but I didn't know how much more of a time investment this was going to be just to take MKNot the tiniest step forward. At the end of the day though, this is a game that I enjoy, and I knew that for the video, this wasn't going to be a satisfying ending. I don't care how many times I'll need to hear that stupid sound, I'm going to complete Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch. I've been saying throughout this video that I've been having a lot of fun with MKNot, and I'd say that every single sub-mode of Worst Day Ever is a fun mode, with the exception of Perfect. My god, is Plankton's plot infuriating. Seriously, dude, I have lost so many good runs to this stupid sound. I kid you not, after I verified Eternal Saddest Day Ever pre-patch, the very next session, I rebeat it again. That could have been it twice now. I just happened to once again get a Plankton bug in the latter half of the run. See, this would normally be a boost to my confidence. If I'm playing a max mode that is 100% skill-based, over time I'll build more and more consistency to the point where wins become extremely common. But when a portion of winning is entirely up to chance, my nerves would get considerably worse. Because even if you have the skill, who knows how long it's going to take to get there again. And that was when Worst Day Ever's visual overload and heavy nerve control requirements finally caught up to me. On the way to verifying Eternal Saddest Day Ever pre-patch, I had 3 fails past 8 minutes. And in all of those, I would say that my nerves were in check for most of the run. However, once I had locked in on perfect, over the next 5 sessions, I would have a total of 6 fails past 8 minutes. Oftentimes to mistakes that I just shouldn't have been making. I knew that nerves were now going to be a big factor, so I had to adjust my strategy to account for an increase in mistakes, and I think I came up with a pretty decent solution. Typically, I would watch costume the same amount throughout the entire night, but this isn't really necessary. In order to fulfill his requirement for a perfect completion, we don't need to hit any specific timer quota, he just can't move from camera 2. This made me realize that I was watching costume way more than I needed to be. So if I was able to farm enough costume timer during the first half of the night, I could just camp the hell out of the office during finale, which makes it a lot easier to mentally track characters. With this final optimization, on July 24th, I got on for my daily MKNot session, and on the very first attempt, this happened.
Finally done with that bullshit, dude. Oh my god, yes. After all those fucking planktons, dude. We gotta check it again to make sure. But I think that's it. I'm 95% sure that I didn't get a plankton there. Thank the stars, bro. That was so fucking annoying, dude.
Finally, it was over. I had fully perfected Mr. Krabs Night of Terror. Now, I would say that I was the first in the world to do this, but it turns out that I was actually one day late. As long as I had been playing MK Not, I thought the only other players going for Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch were Manzanero and Freddy Co. But it turns out there was a fourth player named Toast GD that had been playing MK Not for way longer than I had, and he had a pretty impressive resume with the game. Turns out that he had a similar experience with Plankton RNG, as he had to beat Eternal Saddest Day Ever pre-patch 3 times before he got a winning run and verified Perfect Eternal Worst Day Ever pre-patch on July 23rd. And good stuff to him, he'd pushed MK Not further than anyone else and none of us even knew who he was. So if anyone deserved it, it was Toast GD. Plus, we all know what I was really here for. Oh man, look at those sweet, sweet points.
Yeah, boy.
With that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know the second channel has been without content for quite some time now, and I've just been playing a lot of different things that will eventually be turned into videos here. This channel was meant to feature some more out there and diverse games than the main one, so expect to see something non-FNAF in the near future. Again, thank you so much. Remember to subscribe to both this channel and the main one. I am working on Frick Bears, just give me some time, we will get there eventually. Peace.